Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Places, People, Purpose.
Even if you aren't a coffee lover, today's podcast has some really fun and interesting stories about the history of Panama coffee. If you are a coffee lover and you haven't yet tried Panama coffee, after our podcast today, you will most likely be trying to figure out when you can travel to Panama or how you can buy some Panamanian coffee. What accounts for Panama coffee being some of the best in the world? Actually, several factors come into play. So let's take a closer look at what these are and the history of coffee in Panama. Coffee is a commodity and historically has been priced as such. Over the last 30 years, coffee has traded above $2 only 7% of the time, and below $1, which is below the cost of production for the vast majority of coffee farmers, 31% of the time. So a very general statement about the price of coffee would be that it has been between a range of about $1 to $2 per pound over the last 30 years. Not a lot of price appreciation over a long period of time. The question then becomes, how do you make a living in the coffee industry if you aren't located in a country such as Brazil, where you can take advantage of volume and economies of scale? In 1982, the Specialty Coffee Association was formed, and this was followed by the Specialty Coffee Association of Panama. The whole idea for the formation of these associations was that they believed a premium coffee market could be developed and consumers would be willing to pay more for great coffee. Many coffee farms in Panama are family-owned and have been passed down through generations. This deep-rooted connection to the land and the coffee plants is reflected in how they care for and attend to the cultivation and processing of the beans. Some of the more notable and long-standing families in Panama's coffee industry are the Lamastas, Peterson, Uriz, and Videz families, as well as Richard Coiner. These families and individuals are just a few examples of the many growers and coffee enthusiasts who have contributed to shaping Panama's specialty coffee industry. It would be difficult to read about the history of Panama coffee and not learn about and be impressed by the long-term collaboration of Panamanian growers. Their passion for quality, innovation, and sustainability has elevated the country's reputation to the highest levels internationally. The families learned from each other and also brought in experts from abroad when needed to help them improve their cultivation and processing techniques. Despite all this care and attention, no one really knew that Panama even produced coffee in the early 1900s. Then, in a strange twist of fate, the Panama coffee community received validation that Panama coffee was actually quite good. But this validation came in a pretty unusual way. Turns out that there was a large coffee fraud in the 1990s involving Kona coffee. Kona coffee is a highly prized variety of coffee that is grown in Hawaii's Kona district. Due to its unique flavor profile and limited production, Kona coffee commands a premium price in the market. It was discovered that coffee being sold as Kona for a higher price was actually coffee from regions other than Kona, and some of this coffee was from Panama. So with this strange turn of events, the Panama coffee community received validation that their coffee was actually quite good, as someone certainly believed that it was good enough to be passed off as Kona coffee. Then in the late 1990s, something happened that ultimately lifted Panama to the highest echelons of the specialty coffee market. To understand these events better, we need to learn about some very special coffee beans known as geisha. Geisha coffee originated in Ethiopia. In 1936, Captain Richard Wally was looking for a disease-resistant coffee and found a coffee bean that fit this profile around the Geisha Mountain in what is now Ethiopia. He then took geisha coffee seeds to Kenya, Tanzania, and Costa Rica. But it wasn't until 1963 that Francisco Antonio Saracen, known as Don Pachi, brought a kilo of geisha coffee seeds from Costa Rica to Boquete, Panama. The Peterson family owns the Hacienda de la Esmeralda coffee farm. In the 1990s, the Petersons acquired a new high-altitude farm, which they named Jaramillo. The Jaramillo farm had recently been devastated by coffee leaf rust, but Daniel Peterson noticed that the geisha trees had not been hurt as badly. As a result, the decision was made to plant geisha on higher elevations, including in sections above 1,650 meters, almost 5,500 feet above sea level, even though geisha beans had not previously been planted at this altitude. No one likely anticipated what would happen next. When Daniel and his sister Rachel first tasted or cupped this new high-altitude geisha, it was clear that they had something wildly different. They just weren't sure if the different was good or bad. Shortly after their tasting, some U.S. buyers visited, who also cupped the coffee and essentially went wild. Like wine, coffee has a tasting wheel that helps tasters characterize and judge the quality of coffee. On a scale of 100, the new varietal of geisha received a 95. The global recognition of Panama's specialty coffee can be attributed in part to groundbreaking auctions that showcase the exceptional quality of the country's beans. The Best of Panama competition, established in 1996, played a pivotal role in elevating Panama's coffee industry to international acclaim. This competition provided a platform for local producers to showcase their finest coffees and compete for recognition as some of the world's best beans. In 2001, the Peterson family entered their new geisha coffee in the Best of Panama online auction. Their coffee was sold at a price that was 6 times higher than the market price for commodity coffee. This result reflected not only the excellence of the coffee that the Petersons had produced, but also confirmed that people were willing to pay significantly more money for great coffee. This trend only continued. In the 2004 Best of Panama competition, the Petersons did something they had never done before. During processing, they separated production from different areas of the farm into individual lots. One of the lots they separated came from high up in Jaramillo, and when it landed on the cupping table, it blew everyone away. Hacienda de la Esmeralda went on to win the 2004 Best of Panama competition with their geisha coffee, and it sold at 25 times the commodity market price. This event radically changed the specialty coffee market. Panama has even more attributes that make its coffee some of the best in the world. Its combination of volcanic soil rich in minerals, high altitudes, and moisture brought by winds from both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans create favorable microclimates for cultivating high-quality coffee beans. And there are many of these microclimates throughout the Boquete and Volcan regions.
Another factor very unique to Panama is the workforce that harvests the coffee beans. We've talked about the Nobe Bugle indigenous community in prior podcasts. These indigenous people are very disciplined in their harvesting practices of coffee. Harvesting in Panama is done by hand, and it is done meticulously and repetitively by the Nobe Bugle workers. Not all of the beans ripen at the same time, so the plants must be picked 2, 3, or more times to ensure that the beans are picked at the peak of ripeness. Producers in Panama have also been experimenting with various processing methods to highlight the natural flavors of their coffee beans. An example of this is natural processing, which is where the coffee cherries are dried with the fruit still attached. This processing is done in open air without water and was originated in Ethiopia, as this region doesn't have an abundance of water to wash coffee beans with. Natural processing can result in coffees with unique fruity and sweet flavor profiles. Since 2011, Panama's natural processed geisha coffee beans have commanded some of the highest prices in the world. In fact, in 2022, a pound of geisha coffee sold for $6,034 a pound. Yes, $6,034 for 1 pound of coffee. Panama's specialty coffees are celebrated for their diverse and intricate flavor profiles. Depending on the region, varietal, and processing method, these coffees can exhibit an array of flavors, ranging from floral and citrusy to fruity and chocolatey. The geisha varietal often surprises coffee enthusiasts with its complexity and depth. As Panama's specialty coffee industry continues to evolve, there are both exciting opportunities and challenges on the horizon. The country's coffee producers face the task of maintaining the delicate balance between meeting the growing global demand for their high-quality beans while preserving the unique environmental conditions that contribute to their excellent flavor. Innovation remains key to the industry's future. Farmers and producers are continually experimenting with new varietals, growing practices, processing techniques, and sustainable practices. For example, at the Hacienda La Esmeralda, the hope is that by carefully planting a high-altitude environment with many seeds, including some from the same origin as geisha, other interesting and exciting combinations of variety and microclimate may be found. What we can all be sure of is that Panama's coffee producers are as committed as ever to put a very special experience in each cup of coffee. My mom, sister, and I love Panama coffee. When I visit, I will buy as many pounds of coffee as my carry-on luggage will hold. If you are a coffee lover, please do yourself a favor and try some Panama coffee. You'll be glad that you did. That's our program for today. Hope you enjoyed this really interesting history of Panama's coffee industry and its rise to the highest levels of international excellence. Tomorrow, we are going to look at the history and construction of one of the most amazing engineering projects of all time, the Panama Canal. There are so many interesting stories to tell around this historical feat. We think you will really enjoy these podcasts. Until then, thank you for joining Places, People, Purpose, where we create connections to our world.